Hello, my name is Roger Claxton and welcome to this series of bite-sized talks entitled Poor on the Moor. The talks are in segments and based on the records in the Widecombe archive and the project that commenced in 2011 to digitise and catalogue them. The talks are based on the contents of the recently published book Welfare in Widecombe 1700 to 1900, written by me. You can get a copy through our website widecombe-in-the-moor.com/welfare and various other outlets. There are also e-book versions available. This is the 6th segment of the Poor on the Moor series of talks and discusses the apprenticeship system by which the poor children of the parish were bound out to employers such as local farmers. An Act of Parliament as far back as 1601 empowered churchwardens and overseers to bind any children, and I quote from the Act, whose parents they judge not to be able to maintain them, to be apprenticed where they think fit, till such man-child come to the age of 24, and such woman-child to the age of 21 or marriage. Sometimes money was paid to employers to take apprentices, effectively a premium, but as it was in everyone's interest to keep costs down, other schemes were introduced, such as a rota system, i.e. you took an apprentice when your turn came round. Children could be bound out from the age of 8, and that was changed to age 9 after 1816. They were provided with the basics of living, but generally no money. So often it quotes meat, drink and apparel, lodging, washing and all other things necessary and fit for an apprentice. Boys were generally trained in husbandry, i.e. farm work, and girls in housewifery, although there is an example in a moment of a girl being trained in husbandry. The main purpose behind the system was to prevent the children from becoming a burden on the parish, i.e. claiming poor relief, so this was included in the contract between the parish and the employer. The practice of the child being bound out outside of their home parish became common. This was because the parish effectively exported the responsibility for the child as the settlement status of the child changed so that they belonged to the parish in which they served their apprenticeship. Whether anything was gained by this is a moot point, as other parishes could settle children in Widecombe just as easily as the other way round. We will look at this in a bit more detail in the segment on removal orders. There are approximately 220 apprenticeship indentures in the archive, although many more must have been issued. They cover a roughly 100-year period between 1735 and 1839. So just reflect on this for a moment. Children as young as 8 were removed from their parents and siblings and deposited in a strange home perhaps many miles away, there to work at the behest of a new master and family. The outcome for some of these children does not bear thinking about. I mean, one thing that I haven't been able to find any information out about is how often were they able to see their parents. Okay, let's start by looking at an example of an indenture from 1794. This is Jane Layman's indenture. Jane was probably a Layman, which is a well-known local name. And just a point, the word indenture derives from the indents cut out, in this case of the top of multiple copies of the contracts, which will of course later match up if necessary. And note the pre-printed format. Clearly these were in relatively common use. I won't go through this in full detail, but I will be picking out the more important part in a moment. But just to say in general that this indenture does not mention Jane's age. Note that there are church wardens and overseers or overseers present, 2 justices of the peace and the employer, as well as the child, and often the parents would also be there. And if you look for these in the archive, you will see all the names extracted. And if you add all of these worthies up, there could be quite a few of them. It must have been quite daunting for an 8-year-old child. And there's also a witness. Okay, so let's just look at this section of the indenture in detail. So Jane Layman a poor child of the said parish, apprenticed to John Mudge of Bury Pomeroy, for his estates in Sherwell, i.e. Sherrill, which is in Widdicombe, so that Jane is not being settled outside the parish, with him to dwell and serve from the day of the date of these presents until the said apprentice shall accomplish her full age of 21 years or day of marriage, according to the statute in that case made and provided, during all which term the said apprentice her said master faithfully shall serve in all lawful business according to her power, wit, and ability, and honestly, orderly, and obediently, in all things, demean and behave herself towards her said master and all his, i.e. the family, during the said term. And the said John Mudge, for himself, his executors and administrators, doth covenant and grant to and with the said churchwardens and overseers, and every of them, there and every of their executors and administrators, and there and every of their successors for the time being by these presents, that the said John Mudge, the said apprentice in husbandry work, shall and will teach and instruct, or cause to be taught and instructed, and shall and will during all the term aforesaid find, provide, and allow unto the said apprentice meat competent and sufficient, meat, drink and apparel, lodging, washing, and all other things necessary and fit for an apprentice. And here we are. This is the point about the not being charged to the parish, and also shall and will so provide for the said apprentice that he be not any way a charge, that he or she be not any way a charge to the said parish or parishioners of the same, but of and from all charge shall and will save the said parish and parishioners harmless and indemnified during the said term. There you go. Okay. Now we'll move on to John Collings' Indenture from 1839, sort of later in the period, very similar to the preceding one. First of all, we can see that John is aged 11, which is a little bit older than normal, the poor child of the said parish of Widdicombe, and he's going to be apprenticed to George Hamlin of Widdicombe, so again within the parish. George is a yeoman, and he will be apprenticed to George Hamlin until he reaches the age of 21 years, so not 24 years, but 21 years. And he is going to be trained or taught in the art, trade, or mystery of husbandry. George Hamlin shall and will teach and instruct, or cause to be taught and instructed in the best way and manner that he can during the said term. And let's note again, first of all, the two justices of the peace, and then all of these churchwardens and overseers who are present at the signing. Now, as we've seen, because it's enshrined in Acts of Parliament, this was a compulsory system, and opposition was viewed quite seriously. But you can imagine that some families might not like the idea of their young children being taken away. There's very little evidence of opposition in the archives. But there is one or two, and I'll give you one example here. So this was from 1821, and from the select vestry minutes of November the 30th, and that Thomas Layman is to have his pay discontinued from this time unless he brings his child forward to be bound out. In other words, he's being threatened with his poor relief being removed unless he agrees to allow his child to be taken from him. Okay, so that's the end of the segment on the apprenticeship system. Thank you again for watching and listening, and please stay for the next segment, which talks about removal orders and thus focuses on this idea of everybody having a legal place of settlement. Thanks again for watching.
Thou lift me up and lay me down gently down, till I reach consecrated ground along the old